Good morning, everyone. To share with you what we in Azim Premji Foundation, through the 20-year experience that we've had in the public education system, think should be the focus. Finally, that's where I'm going to leave you with before my colleague Rajashri is going to take over and share as to what are those specific perspectives that we feel is required to work in education. And hence, while this session was being designed, one of the things that came to the mind of people who are working on the design is that it's very useful for us to lay the context up front, so that when we speak about perspectives, we know why is it that we have these perspectives. Over 20 years of our experience, why is it that we've chosen these XYZ perspectives over many others that may have been there? And that's how this session emerged, wherein I'm going to spend the next half an hour or so trying to lay the context within which education system in our country is located. I come from a history background, so I can't let anyone get away from not going back and looking into the past. So that is what we're going to start with. So we have a diverse group here, similar to I think many of our first semester classrooms, right? With varied experiences we come, and so I see some ex-students, I see some elderly people who I'm sure would have worked in education, or those who have worked in other fields. So what I'm going to be sharing with you is quite generic in that sense. So hopefully all of you can get engaged before Rajashri takes you on, to that lovely deep road into which we all would like to invite all of you to tread on and work with us. So first up, what do you think these numbers are? Just the numbers. What are these numbers? Years? Yeah, spanning across 400. What do you think these numbers are? Yeah, somewhere I heard a G, and so that's how close you could be. What are these numbers? It's a wild guess, right? I mean, here I'm playing this wild card game, so there is absolutely no other clue. It's just a few years and few large numbers. Yeah, 3,29,417 there, and here you have 33,725,635. These are the gross domestic product calculated. Of course, given the quantitative macroeconomics research that's happened over the last few decades, it is possible to go back in time, all the way back to 2000 years from year one, and calculate the GDP of the world and different parts of the world, right? So there is this professor who worked deeply on this, passed away a few years ago, but then his work is carried on, and so there is a lot of numbers that get generated based on a lot of very painstaking data collection efforts, and so it's based on that in dollars. These GDP values for Europe, primarily Western Europe, the United States, and overall the world is calculated. Now if you look at this here, it's about 14, 15, and this is about 33. So about 45% of the GDP just before the beginning of this millennium was with the so-called first world, right, Western Europe and the United States. But if you go back just 400 years, look what those numbers are, right? And look at this. So what is the percentage? Right, so in 400 years, these countries in Europe and the United States, and when you say United States, you could probably include Canada as well, so North America, grew at such phenomenal pace that they pretty much have today's half of the GDP that the world has. But then that was obviously at the cost of some others, right? Because if there is this gap which becomes just about half here, then obviously there were some big players and our neighbor, who's becoming bigger and greater again to the times that they enjoyed 400 years ago, you see had even to the beginning of the 19th century almost a third of the world's GDP. Yeah, obviously, the middle of the 20th century was when things were really bad for most of the world other than the first world, because most of the rest of the world was colonized world, which had just about got independence. That is the 1950s, right? So we also get our independence in 1947. So all these large economies had dwindled. Though China was never colonized directly, it had implications, negative implications, and so this was how it was. And over the last 50-60 years, we've seen that some of these economies like China have started again growing. So who's the other one who's going to make up here? Easy guess, right? So we were not too far behind China at any point of time, including during the time when we were pretty much at the bottom of the world, right? So between China and India, we made more than 50% of the GDP 400 years ago, and even more as we go beyond the 400 years. A large part of the world's wealth was created here in China and India, and of course, we've started moving up after independence, but very slowly. Though we are expected to become the 5 trillion economy and the 5th largest economy in the world, we all know it's going to take some time. But then the point that I want to make here is that there was a time when the society, our Indian society, was a very vibrant society, and a lot of wealth creation was happening here. A lot of people hence came looking for our country, to trade with our country. So if that was the case, then obviously there must be something that was happening here to make sure that people here are able to do that. So which means that there must have been education systems both in China and India which was helping this wealth get created. So which basically means that there was innovation happening, there was individual creativity, and there was entrepreneurship, enterprise, all that basically which led the Western world take off from the about 18th, 19th century, because from the time of Industrial Revolution is where all this innovation and creativity helps the Western world set the platform, and then with the platform that they are set and with the colonized world, they're able to then take off, right? So there must have been something good happening in the country. In countries such as China and India, and obviously in India. And when you look back, you do see that there were some systems in place. So thanks to people like Madison, we have these figures because of which we can use this hard data set to go back and try and see as to what was the kind of eminence that was enjoyed by countries such as ours. Well, figures can take you back, as I told you, to year 1, and you will see that India starts here. Our GDP was more than 30%, and then you see the red, which is China, India, going all the way down to the depths, right, by the time of the second half of the 20th century. So this was happening, the glorious times, also because the society was such, there were systems in place. Anyone who can guess what ruins these are? Very close, they're Takshila ruins, right? So there were these universities, obviously, Buddhist universities for the times. This was before Christ, and then of course the Hindu universities, and then in the medieval times the Islamic universities. These were the universities that were creating the kind of people who were able to produce the kind of wealth that took our countries to such heights. So there were systems in place that was allowing this wealth creation all the way to the modern times. This is the other one that you mentioned, Nalanda, large universities which had residential campuses. So then if all this was there, what happened suddenly? Why was there this drop as soon as Of course, people can very easily correlate it to the timeline of colonization, and as you see colonization happening, and for us in our country, the British taking over different geographical areas of our country, you start seeing our GDP go down. So, is that the only reason why what happened in the ancient or medieval times fell apart? So, the colonial rule was just for about 200 years. So, the 3,000 years of work could be broken apart in 200 years. Is that where the answer lies? If that's the answer, then it's very simple, right? I mean, just get rid of whatever happened in those 200 years, go back to the past and recreate things. So the answer is not as simple. There were many things that happened. Our society was getting stagnated for various reasons. We were not able to do the kind of innovations that Europe was able to do, and hence we could not get on to that industrial revolution. Obviously, there are reasons that can be associated with it. Colonization was one of it, but then why were we allowed to be colonized are other questions that come in. The other thing is, if that was the case, then how is it that we still, in the modern times, that is the 19th, 20th century, have people who are well known around the world? Very well known figure. I hope all of you recognize, but I'm sure some of you may not. So let's just have a call out. Who is it? Yeah, a very fabulous brain. Obviously, most well known for the Krishnaraj Sagar Dam across the Kaveri, but then the way he taught and the way he put forth scientific ideas. We all know him, right? Another brilliant mind. Homi Baba, known all over the world for the kind of physics that he dealt with, nuclear physics. So these are people who came out of that system which the British brought into our country, which we or many complain was one of the reasons why our system fell apart, right? Because the British brought in their education system, but they were the ones who grew up during the time of the British, right? And they became these, these really fabulous minds who were recognized around the world. So then, was that system really that bad? If it was giving out people of this kind, these are just few names, right? I mean, even our Gandhi, Nehru, Tagore, the more well-known people, they all were educated people. They were not just politicians. They were educated enough in the schooling system here that they could go and compete with the rest of the world in universities in London and universities in the US. So, which means the schooling system was doing something, right? Well, some may complain that yes, under the British it was okay, but then we took it over and then we really didn't do anything for the last 70 years. Well then, one can think of some of these names. Pichai, Nadella, Nui, they all out of our schooling system. Of course, they went on to the higher education outside, studied in Stanfords and MITs, but then where was the schooling? The schooling was in India, right? Though of course, all of them did study in government schools and all of them studied in the private, but then, I think Pichai's school was aided and so was Nui's school, but then they were part of the schooling system here in the country. So then, is it really problematic? Why do we say that we have an issue with education? Do we really need to change it? Because if you go and ask people, they would say, well, we all have come out of the system. What's wrong with us? We have turned out fine. So what is this huge overhauling that people are talking about? It's not really as bad as people are making it out to be, right? What do you think? Is it really as bad as people are making out to be? I mean, we are having, since time immemorial and even in the modern times, such popular people who have been recognized around the world. If, for instance, you put Microsoft, Google, and Pepsi as part of countries, you pretty much have leaders of United States, Russia, and China. That's the kind of force that these three have, right, in the corporate world. So you have individuals coming out of a school system getting on to be there at that world stage. So what's wrong with the system? Yeah, is there anything wrong? Anyone?
We need a change of mindset, going to a creating kind of a shift in the kind the impetus which should be given should be more for the creativity level than at the
Okay, so the kind of things that are done, but then, you know, if these three people weren't having those skill sets, they couldn't have reached the top. I mean, they're not just ones.
necessarily one versus the other, but encouraging creativity will help us.
Right. No, all that I'm saying is that these three people, I'm not, no, I'm not getting into a Q&A so that, you know, we get into the Q&A session, but then this is just to kind of keep all of you active enough. These are just three people, right, as, I'll just come, as just placeholders here. There are hundreds of them, and all coming out of our schooling system. As I said, may not be our university system, though they all even went to IIT, you know, Pichai was from IIT, he was from Manipal Institute. Right? I think Nui is the only one after school who went out straight. No, even she studied. She also studied here. So schooling and higher education, it's only for the highest of higher education that they went out. So if all that creativity and everything that you're speaking of was not there, they couldn't have gone where they have reached today. And these are just three people. There are hundreds of them. So what is the problem then? Why are we saying that things are not happening? There is something that I'm hinting at, and I'm hoping that someone would get at it here.
Yeah, one very prominent figure which is missing from this group is Srinivas Ramanujan. I think everybody is aware of that. So my question is, can we take a very small percentage of population and generalize it to the whole system, saying these people came out of such dire conditions? So my view is they were just individuals and they just did it in spite of the situation. So we still have a big problem to tackle.
Okay. So thank you, that's what I was looking for. So there are many names missing. These are just, I mean, it could be Ramanujam and starting earlier, Sushruta, you know, Virya and Aryabhattas and, you know, the Charakas and, you know, many people all through the 3,000, 4,000 years of history that we have. But that point is that in the millions and today billions that we are, this is nothing, right? The numbers are really small because the system that we know of is doing this. And so finally, number of students who were getting into higher education just about 20 years ago, these numbers have changed, I'll give you more updated figures, were just 12 out of 100 who joined grade 1. So this is the inefficiency funnel that our system continues to have. And you can all look back and you can in fact do your own anecdotal you know, data work on this by looking at who are the 100 children, your friends who joined with you, and see as to how many of them really got into higher education. The problem, of course, is you know, if we come from certain backgrounds, the chances are that, you know, larger number of our friends would have along with us joined higher education. But when you take the entire population, by the time we finish elementary education, half of the children who join grade 1 are out of school. By the time you reach grade 1 or grade 10, it is just about 40%. And out of that 40%, again half of them are unable to clear those board exams, and so you have only about 20% from the 100 here, only about 20, less than 20 who are able to pass the 10th standard board. And we all know that that certificate you know, is of a certain value, though we know the silliness in which these summative exams are done, right? I mean, your 10 years of studies, and in 40 minutes, in 60 minutes, you're supposed to you know, answer these questions and certify or get your certification, which can't get any sillier. 10 years of learning can't be assessed in 60 minutes and said that yes, you are a 10th standard pass. And that's the reason why there are reforms that have taken place around the world. In India, we had that reform wherein CBSE made 10th board optional, but the society is in no mood to accept these progressive ideas, so we've gone back to having these silly board exams. So hopefully there'll be a time when we can get rid of it. But the point is that after 10 years, there are only 20 who are able to get themselves a certification saying that they've done schooling. And of that, for various reasons, another 50%, 40% drop out, and then there are 12 who get into higher education. So that is the small number of most of us here. I'm sure all of us have done higher education here, but almost all of us would have done, and so we are part of this 12%. So you can imagine that we are having our brothers and sisters, I'm speaking about our generation, and hence brothers and sisters, friends, colleagues who are working in various other areas where if they had the opportunity to do higher education, they could have probably been doing similar things that you and I aspire to. 88% of them are on the other side, right? Things have changed over the last 20 years. A lot of effort has gone in. This 52 has moved to 82. So you have more than 80% of the children today being able to reach 8th standard. And one of the foremost policy reforms that have happened in this regard is the no detention policy. You don't fail a child till 8th standard. That's part of the Right to Education Act, right? Because the onus of a child learning is on the adult there. You can't fail a child, definitely not till 8th standard. After that you may say adolescent, they don't listen, you need to have a punitive measure, but there are other ways of bringing in that punitive measure. But till 8th standard, the onus is on the adult, be it the parent, the guardian, the teacher, whoever. It can't be the child, because if you fail the child, you are getting the child closer to dropping out of the system. Though after 8th, children are being failed. Private schools definitely fail children if they are not up to mark in 9th standard, because private schools brand value goes down if their 10th standard results are not good, right? So you have the numbers dropping, so you have about 75% of the children reaching 10th standard. Then we all know the pass percentage in 10th standard is around 70% overall on an average. There are some states which do worse off, and so you have basically about 50 children who from the 100 are able to pass 10th standard. Yeah? So we still at inefficiencies of about 50% when you're looking at school level. And then today's gross enrollment ratio in higher education is 25%. Okay. So there are 25 students, I shouldn't have the word children there. So between 15 to 21, you have 25% of our population who are enrolled in a higher education program in this country. Yeah, so the inefficiency or the efficiency funnel is still at 25%. Inefficiency is 75. Yes, you may say that, well, world over, even the most advanced societies don't have 100% enrollment in higher education. But then most of these societies have more than 50%. And in fact, the country's aim is that in about 10-15 years, we should get this up to at least 50%. So which basically means schooling will have to become 100%, right? So that's the kind of enormous work that we have. Rajgopal was talking about a lot of good things that have happened. The good thing that have happened is this: from 50 we moved to 80, right? All these numbers have changed over the last 20 years, particularly with intensive effort on education, but long way to go. We still have a gross enrollment ratio at higher education of 25%. No, it's university. So I'm missing out the 11th, 12th here. 11th, 12th data is a little problematic, but then this, the drop between 50 to 25 is happening in the 11th and 12th. So there are many who do 11th and 12th and they're dropping out either while doing 11th and 12th or soon after 11th and 12th. So you have the 25% loss from 50 children here passing 10th standard to only 25 joining a higher education course, be it a diploma or a degree.
Then is that a failure of education system, or is it just a reflection of poverty in India? That at that age, around 18, is when people need to take up a job and therefore they drop out of the
Yes.
education.
So it is a systemic issue. It's not necessarily an education issue, it's a systemic issue. So if, for instance, we have to raise this GR, obviously there has to be a lot more that the system will have to do. When I say system, the government will have to enable the system through, for instance, just one example that comes straight away is scholarships, right? There has to be enormous scholarships, and for instance, the fee in higher education. There is this huge agitation in Jawaharlal Nehru University for so many months now, because the reality is that many students cannot afford, right? And it's not that JNU fees needs to be increased. We need 100 more JNUs across the country with that fee level and that quality of education, and that is when these numbers will go up. So the government will have to put in the money, and if we are serious about the country's future, and if we want to increase this, because otherwise, you know, we are headed towards chaos. The more of this happening and the more divide that the society is getting into, the class divide, we are headed for chaos. There is no doubt about that. So there is urgent work, there is earnest work that is required, and you rightly said it's not just education, one needs to really look at it holistically. I will try and cover some of it, though I don't have too much time. I will try and see whether I can bring in some of those connections, and then we will open it up for question and answer. So the scale is huge. When we are speaking about that kind of dropout, see, there is a 18% dropout between 6 to 13 years as per the 2011 census. Now these numbers are slightly lower than the numbers that I showed you in the inverted pyramid, because this is 2011 census data, right? So over the last 9 years also we've had some progress. But let's just stick to that. We are going to have another census next year. Hopefully we will get more updated. But just for us, it is this number that is important. So 18%, 6 to 13 year old, that is before 8th standard, that's about how many drop out, about 20% you can say. But then this is the kind of number that it is. And so finally, if you take from 6 to 18 year olds, you have 6 crores. 60 million children who are out of school. MHRD gives you a data of 6 million. Your official data today, even the MHRD minister has given out 6 million, but when you look at scholars who have done research, if you look at the Oxfam report, if you look at our own census and look at these figures, the number is 10 times more. Now one may argue, right, forever on as to whether these numbers are, you know, overestimated or the MHRD numbers are underestimated, but the point for us to keep in mind is these numbers are large. Even if we are talking about just 1% in our country of 1 billion people, we are talking about 1 million, right? So even if MHRD is saying that today it's just about 12% who are out of school, you can just imagine the millions that we are talking who are out of school. So the issue is complex. That's the kind of message that I am trying to put out to you, that those of us who work in education, who want to work in education, needs to understand this landscape. Issue is very complex, one because of the scale, two because of the diversity. The kinds of the region that we have, we of course have 6,500 talukas, so the blocks, educational blocks that we work in. Each block would have about 300 schools, right, to get the kind of access that we have today. Almost 99% of the habitations, we need to have about 300 schools in each of the blocks, which gives us about 2,000 schools per district. We have about 700 plus districts. The kinds of languages that we have, right, nearly 500 living languages. Of that, only 22 are official. But then, so what is it that you're going to start teaching the child with? The child is coming with a certain language. The local language is different. The language that the nation wants is different. The aspirational international language is different. So where do you begin with? Not an easy question to answer, right? We have certain positions. I'm not going to get into those positions. Populations, populations out there in the desert. Rajgopal was talking about Badmer, right out there in the desert, and need to spend half an hour to just go and get a pot of water, and then right up the hills in Uttarkashi, or the tribal hamlet in Chamrajnagar, which is so close to Bangalore, wherein you wade through the forest to go in, to that hamlet, and so that's the kind of scattered population that we have. So out of school children is huge numbers, but then of those who are in school, if you look at the numbers, we are really in dire straits. Very quickly I'm going to run through a few slides since we are running out of time. This is a 10-year-old assessment, international assessment that we participated in. It's called PISA, Program for International Student Assessment. This is a program which is run by the OECD countries, that is, you could call them the developed societies, who run this assessment mandatorily pretty much for all the countries which are part of OECD, that is Western Europe, United States, Australia, New Zealand, but then others can participate. India did participate in 2009, and we said two of our best states are going to participate, Himachal Pradesh there and Tamil Nadu here, and we got ranked here just above Kyrgyzstan, right, 72, 73. These are 15-year-olds, so these are children who have been in school for the 10 years, and if they have been to pre-primary, then another 2 more years. So after 10, 12 years of schooling, when you assess our children on broad skill sets that are required for the 21st century, that is what PISA assesses, that is where we are. Now, India is again going to participate next year. So after a 10-year gap, we begin got a little courage saying that let's try out again, but this time they become a little more sensible. They're saying only our KV students are going to participate, and I think Chandigarh, right? So they're saying, okay, there's no point in testing an entire system. We know it's not too good. We need to work on it. But Kendriya Vidyalayas are the benchmark. So let's see as to where our KV students match up to the rest of the world. So that's going to happen next year. Yeah, so UAE again, can't compare every other country there. I think these rankings, that's one thing. We should not really compare any other country, on that. It should be more like a mirror and see as to what we can do, because we definitely don't have the resources of UAE, right? There is no point in getting all our students to be writing this, because the kind of data that you will see now will make you feel that for another 100 years we should not be participating in PISA. But hopefully, if all of us join together, our courage to participate in PISA across the country can come in a little earlier. This is just a quick look at what kind of questions and what is the kind of comparison in PISA. Just look at this graph here. So this is language for 4th grade, that's the question. So there are some of these pilots that are done, and other younger class children are asked to take some assessments just to kind of get a gauge. So this is from one such experiment. In language 4th grade, for a particular question, if the world average is 60%, when we say world average, it's not just the advanced societies or the Western world, the entire world put together except India, right, is 60%, and we are at half of that. In mathematics 4th standard, similar story, even larger is the gap. Math standard 8th standard, similar gap. So the gap is there across the schooling levels, and obviously 10th standard hence is not different. And what are the kind of questions? See, just read this question. When Lakhan discovered that he had mice in his house, it did not bother him much at first, but the mice multiplied. They began to bother him. They kept on multiplying, and finally there came a time when he could not stand it, or he could stand it no more, or something, right? So the simple question is, why did Lakhan want to get rid of the mice? And you see this option, right? He always hated mice. There were too many of them. They laughed too loudly. They ate all his cheese. Now for that kind of a question in grade 4, obviously if your system is doing enough, to get students to basically think on anything that is provided to them rather than just mug up and answer, then you won't have these numbers. 80% of children across the world can, at grade 4, can answer this, but in our country, 40%. So 60%, majority of our children cannot answer this kind of a question. That is the system, giving you some kind of, or rather that's what the system is, right? Very quickly, a few slides, maybe another 5 minutes. 2008 to 2018, this is a 10-year graph of ASER. Pratham, another large NGO, does this annual status of educational report. They've been doing it for 15 years. This is for grade 3. Are they able to read a paragraph from their own textbook of the previous grade, right? Less than 30% are able to read. 70% of children after 3 years of school can't read a previous year's, which basically means they can't read, right? Able to do subtraction, simple subtraction, again less than 30%. Percent of children in government schools in standard 3 who can at least do subtraction across the state, because you may say that this is, well, I mean, if you average it out, obviously, but then we have some wonderful states performing very well, Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Himachal. Well, even in Kerala, less than 50% are able to do it after 3 years. So the system is a problem, but then of course there is a variation. You have only 8% in Rajasthan to 44% in Kerala. So Kerala obviously looks, very, very good. But then, this is the average. But then when you look at it overall as a country, even in the best of our states, half of our children are unable to do what they are supposed to do, right? So the problem is across the country. But then the level is different, the intensity is different, but we cannot ignore any part of the country. So there are systemic issues. This is 5th standard. There was 3rd, this is 5th standard, who can do basic arithmetic operations of 2nd standard, right? Which is division, less than 30% here. If you are getting 5th standard children to read 2nd standard books, it's just about 50%. So you see the problem, the numbers, the largeness of it. The last one, when you go into basically children who can correctly solve numerical division problems of that grade, 6th standard, you will see that about 35%. In 7th standard, it's about 40%. In 8th standard, it's about 45%. So any data that you take from any of our assessment, half the children, because some may quibble saying that, oh, ASER sampling is not all right, that is not all right. But then any data, even from the government or from any NGO, from anywhere you take data, half the children in the class are unable to perform at that grade level, is the broad message. And so if that is the issue, I'll come to this question of how it's not just that issue. That's one huge issue, right, in education. But then the problem is, as I think you were rightly saying, we have multiplicity of issues. So if education is in such dire strait, this is the situation of our hunger, right? We rank even below our South Asian neighbors. Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, and obviously Sri Lanka does better in almost everything, right? So this is the kind of score that we have, and getting ranked above 100. So this is our hunger, right? And children hunger. So if there are hungry children and if they are coming to school, hence nobody should question as to why is the child provided a meal in school. Nobody should question, and no one, including the teacher, can question, because many teachers, obviously, given the kind of burden on them, they say, why should I serve the midday meal? I am trained as a teacher. But the reality in our country is, it is unfortunate that a teacher is trained only as a teacher. The teacher needs to be trained as to become a goddess, but then we can't train anyone to become that. So you need to train a teacher with multi skill sets and understanding overall situation of the country, because if a child is hungry, there is no point in you doing some excellent lessons in your classroom. Midday meal or breakfast even before that is pretty much mandatory for the situation that we are in. To end our slides, with all that's happened, this is the kind of issue that we have wherein the richest 1% have nearly 50% of the wealth, and the 60% have less than 5% of the wealth. That's the kind of division that has occurred in our society. So the education system is not doing enough. The education system out of which the rich are coming are not giving back enough. So in fact, if in an ideal situation, this 50% should be all of them, or rather this 1%, all of them should be so concerned that almost all their wealth need to be getting into rectifying the situation, right? But how many do we have? We can count in our fingers, right? From this 1% who are putting the money back to helping the society come out of this mess, because this is not just absurd, it is embarrassing for anyone in the country to say that this is what we are. Pretty much many capitalist countries, including the US, have similar graphs. In reality, this is how it looks, right? This is Mumbai. These are the towers where the 1% live, and this is where you have the 60%. And look at the class divide. Is this a society that we want, or does this have to change? Because if this has to change, a lot of things need to happen. One thing clearly is we need to start with what we do in education. I'll just run through these because overall we don't have enough across any of our key indicators. Yeah, since we've lost some time, I'll just run ahead. So the big question for us is this, right? You can spot the children, right? So these two children, if not enough is done, their life is not going to really get off the street. So it's not just about getting them into school, it is about giving them joy when they come in so that they want to stay there. Talking to them in the language that they understand rather than fight about whether we need 3-language formula, whether we need to push in the state language or we need to create a national language. So first of all, speaking to them in the language that they understand or in the manner that they understand, even if we don't know the language, in pre-primary, in fact that's the fight. Forget about the language. Can we get in child-friendly, activity-based learning approaches into our pre-primary, and then languages children will pick up, right? So can we bring about those policy reforms that these children can go on to study till they are 18, and then with their individual capacities able to contribute to the economy in the manner that any 18-year-old, 21-year-old is expected to. So that really is the question ahead of us, and I think when Rajshri takes the next session, you will be looking at, for that kind of an approach, then what is it that we need to do. Okay. Yeah. We've seen this, so lots of progress that has been made. In fact, one thing that I will bring to your notice is this. Lots of progress, right? I mean, literacy from 17% before independence to 74% now. 140 million children being fed every day in our government schools is a huge achievement for this country. When it started, when people spoke about a midday meal program, people laughed. They said, you have 300 million children in school. Even if half of them have to be fed, it's 150 million children every day. Are you off your mind to be suggesting something like that? But today, after 15 years, this program has run with very few incidents wherein things have gone wrong. Every day, and in some places, even during summer holidays, more than 140 million children are getting fed. It's a huge success. We should be proud of this success. But can we then take this forward and work on all these aspects so that those children whom we saw there are, I'll leave it with that image, are able to, like us, hopefully join higher education and meet their aspirations. So I'll stop here. Thank you for the patient hearing.